All right, let's keep our attention on everything happening in Washington, D.C. Again, this is Donald Trump's final full day as president of the United States. Joe Biden is set to be inaugurated tomorrow at noon Eastern. So let's talk about the shape that the Biden economic policies may take. Brian Gardner joins us now. He is Washington policy strategist, chief Washington policy strategist, over at Stifel. Brian, thanks so much for joining the show today. So let's begin with that fiscal aid package that we expect Janet Yellen to kind of pitch as part of this, nominating process. How big do you expect the administration, the incoming Biden administration, to be able to go, and how much of their, political juice that all new administrations have do you expect them to use up on getting an additional fiscal package through the Senate?
Thanks for having me on this morning. I don't know how much political capital they have to spend. There's a lot of other items going on with the pandemic, with the departure of President Trump and impeachment controversies. And so I think Democrats are still strategizing. So my best guess is that anything that passes, and passage is not assured, but if anything passes down the road, it's going to be substantially smaller than the $1.9 trillion package.
So what does that then look like? I mean, what's most palatable that's going to get through? And is that going to be enough, not just for the economy, but for the markets?
So when you look at the 1.9 trillion plan, there are items in there that are not, definitively related to COVID relief. So you can start stripping those out. And I think probably get something into the $600 to $700 billion range. There's obviously a bucket of $350 billion, I think it was, for state and local government relief. Republicans have not gone along with that. It did not go along with that in the previous December bill. That's going to be a very controversial topic in negotiations going forward, and so that's a big number. So you start chipping away at that, you can reduce the $1.9 trillion number in a hurry. So I think it's, as I said, I think it's $600 to $700 billion, possibly going higher than that. But it also depends on where we are when the bill is being drafted and negotiated. If it drags out into the spring and summer and the economy is starting to resume, it takes a lot of pressure off Republicans to give in on some of their demands, and you could see the bill start to shrink from there.
Brian, let's talk a bit about regulation. Certainly a big theme when the incoming Trump administration was taking office, that there'd be a big deregulatory push. Certainly the expected appointment of Gary Gensler at the top of the SEC changes that outlook, at least in the financial services industry. What's your read on how the SEC's role could change as we get into the Biden years here?
So where I think regulatory-wise, I think we've kind of settled into what the rules are going to be going forward. I don't think we're going to see a big counter move to the Trump move, which was a counter move to the Obama administration's actions to implement Dodd-Frank. So I think most of the rules are what we see them today. I think the emphasis is going to be on enforcement. During the last 2 years, the SEC enacted a new rule, Regulation Best Interest, which regulates the conduct by brokers. I think enforcement of that new rule, which Democrats criticize, but I think the enforcement of that rule is going to be a very high priority. Also, how the SEC deals with settlements. When they go after a defendant, there's usually a settlement that does not require a defendant to admit guilt or wrongdoing. There's a lot of pressure coming from the left, and has been for years, to get rid of those waivers and to force a defendant to admit. And that starts opening up the door to civil action. So monetary monetary penalties can become even bigger. And then waivers on using shelf filings. Again, if you're involved in an enforcement action, whether you get a waiver to keep using shelf filings, I think that's another thing that Gensler is going to look at very closely. And then the whole idea of crypto, where he has taught on blockchain at MIT. It's obviously the technology behind crypto It's interesting. We have an incoming SEC chairman probably incoming SEC chairman, who's more knowledgeable on crypto than any of his other predecessors. So I think enforcement, crypto, those are kind of the big areas that Gary Gensler is going to be looking at the SEC.
Brian, I've known you for a while. I can't believe we're here talking about crypto. I don't think I've actually ever discussed crypto for you, but really that's a topic for a different day. I have a piece right now on Yahoo Finance looking at potential tech regulation under the Biden administration. Just based on your knowledge and of the inner workings of DC, do you think the Biden administration picks up the baton from the Trump administration in terms of regulatory action on a Facebook, on an Amazon, on a Google?
So politics make strange bedfellows, and there is a lot of agreement between the populists on the left and the right, the progressives in the Democratic Party, populists in the Republican Party, on regulation of tech in terms of antitrust. I think the antitrust angle on tech is not going away. I think it's going to intensify in the Biden administration. So, yeah, this is I think a theme that investors should pay a lot of attention to, because there is bipartisan agreement that there is too much concentration of power within some tech companies. Now, there's a disagreement on what remedies should be and what solutions should be, but you'd be surprised about how much agreement there is on using antitrust to go after tech.
And then, Brian, finally, one of the biggest stories of the early Trump years was the relationship with China and the trade war there, the maybe resolution of it. And it's kind of, I think a lot of people forget where it actually stands today. How do you think the Biden administration will kind of approach that relationship as it has evolved over the last couple of years?
So we started talking about the Yellen testimony in terms of fiscal policy. I think the more interesting aspect of the hearing could be China and trade. Now, she's not going to be the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative, but there are going to be a lot of questions coming at her, I expect, on China. I don't think that the China tariffs are going away anytime soon. I think there are constituencies within the Democratic Party that like the tariffs. And given events in Hong Kong over the last couple of weeks on cracking down against advocates of democracy, I think the Biden administration is in a really tough spot in the short term, to do any actions to modify the tariffs, reduce them at all. There is litigation going on in the U.S. Brought by some business groups that argue that the Trump administration overstepped its legal bounds in imposing those. If that litigation works out for the business groups, then the Biden administration at that point has some political cover to reduce the tariffs, to modify them. But in the short term, I'm pretty sure they're staying in place.
All right, Brian Gardner, Chief Washington Policy Strategist over at Stifel. Brian, always great to get your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining the program this morning.
Thanks for having me, guys.